Good morning, everybody. I can't dance. Only thing about me is the way I talk. Good morning, everybody. We should be up and streaming. Hey, Chris. Hey, Martin. Hey, Lisa. Good morning all around. Hey, Mindy. Oh, hey, Miles. You've been sleeping over there this whole time. Hey, Amy. Hey, Sue. Hey, Eric. Morning, Joanne and Dina. Hey, Mom. Hey, Lorena.
Goodman, ladies and gentlemen, the man with the torrid clarinet and the even more torrid
Hey, Michelle.
rhythms all down
Hey, Mary and Debbie.
the urban room of the Congress Hotel
Hey, Maureen.
in Chicago.
Good morning.
One of Irving Berlin's
Hey,
greatest
Patty.
Blue Skies.
Morning, everybody. Hey, Emily. All right, Miles. Patty's working. Remember that, okay? Hey, Emily. Hey, Betsy. Patty. Hey, Sue. Yeah, the roads don't seem to be too bad. We didn't get anywhere near 8 inches. We got maybe 2 inches, I'd say. Still kind of coming down, so I've had a nice morning sitting in my chair by the window, which is not comfortable. Hey, Giordana, but I get to look out the window with the snow falling over brick buildings. Love it. Hey, Georgia, Carol, Bob, Gladys, Gail. Oh, this Miles. Morning, Leah. Hey, Susan and Lisa, Boker Tov. Manishma. Hey, Heather. Hey, Rodney. Hey, Pamela. Good morning. Snow is a little disappointing. We thought we were supposed to get like 4 to 8 inches. We didn't get 4 inches. Hey, Marita. Hey, Robert. Hey, Todd over on Twitch. Hey, Linda. Hey, Kim, Heather, Rob, Wendy. A whole bunch just came by. Hey, Caesar in Poland. Hey, Dad. Hey, Dory. Happy New Year all around. Hey, Susan. Hey, Meg. Hey, Casey. Hey, Cheryl. I don't know. Priya has definitely never seen snow before. Not that she would remember. Maybe when she was a tiny, tiny kitten. Hey, Phyllis. Not since she's been here anyway. So I don't know what they think of that. Priya's still kind of afraid of new things. So she's been digging in the dirt in the plant up on the mantle for a while now. Hey, Patricia. Hey, Bridget. Hey, Melissa. Phyllis. Dana. Hey, Carrie. Patricia. Hey, Jenny. Miles, do not claw at this sweater. Morning, David. Hey, Kendra and Kelly. Smiley day to you, Lana. Hey, Ellen. You guys can see Priya back behind me on the couch there. Ah, good stretch. Hey, Karen and John. Hey, Xenia. Hey, Jan. Morning, Karen. Hey, Sarah and Kathy. Good morning all around. Welcome to another edition of Mysterious Chicago. Happy New Year to you, John. And hey, Laura. Good morning all around. Oh yeah, Priya has learned to jump onto higher things in the past week. I've caught her up on the high bookshelves a couple of times lately.
With all my heart.
But guys, you know we can't play until after the show. Okay? So just relax a bit. Hey. Oh, hey, Trish. Hey, Ann. Hey, Susan. Bruce, I am drinking some throat coat tea today, but I've already had some other tea, a couple of cups of coffee, and a mug of butternut squash soup. It's been a good day for warm drinks. Oh, and some Airborne. I have some of that pretty regularly. Miles. It's not time yet. You must wait. Happy 2022 to you, Judy. Hey, Michelle. Hey, Chris. Miles, no, don't dig in that. Those aren't toys, that's Daddy's stash. Hey, Octavio, well, good luck doing that. Aiden doesn't go back to school for a few weeks yet, for college. Hey, Irene. Hey, Julianne. Oh, Miles. You're gonna knock over the phone stabilizer, and the coins, and Daddy's stash. Please stop. Hey, buddy. Hey, Rebecca. Dottie, Doreen, Deb, Julianne, everybody. Hey, Laura over on YouTube. Yes, it is time for the Miles and Priya show. Coming at you live! Hey, Cheryl. Wendy. Oh, I do. Alright, I'm going to shut down the email program, so if anybody's trying to email with tech support questions, too late! Ah, thanks for coming on it, Christine. I'm just thinking, when today's story took place, Betty White was alive and living several miles up the road. Laura, I haven't seen any updates on the Frank's house renovation coming up yet. Not in a while. Miles, you see? Hey, Peter. Hey, Ashley. Hey, Rob. Yeah, Priya is a very cute little girl. Let her do her show. Hey, Sherlock. $22 in Dallas. Well, tomorrow for Mural Monday, it's going to be 7. Oh. Hey, Bridget's mom. Morning, Karen. Miles, well, at first when I was trying to relearn this tour, because, I haven't done this tour in about a year, there's a lot of details and moving parts in this tour. So I was sitting down to relearn it, but Miles would not let me sit at the desk at 5 o'clock this morning. He had to crawl all over everything, walk across the keyboard again and again, like he does when you watch Whiskey and a Cookie sometimes. Morning, Grandma Bell. Hey, Laura, don't worry, you're not late. Hey, Denise and Jerry. Minus 11 in... That sounds like Minneapolis, all right, Michelle.
And they all loved it. They all loved those passes when they played by
Hey, Nancy. Hey, April.
I know another one just in the
I don't know what we'll do about Mural Monday yet tomorrow. How bold I will feel. I've already kind of used up most of the ones near me. Keely, good luck with that. Hey, Maggie, Happy New Year over on YouTube. Yeah, I could paint my own mural, I suppose. Have to take a lot of stuff down. Be okay with that. Well, yeah, it could be that I just find a mural from someplace else and do it from home. We'll see. But it's winter time, you know. I'm used to going out in the cold. Miles. Hey, Lisa. Happy New Year to you. Hey, Dara. We're going to let Benny Goodman finish out this song, and then we'll get started. So, Miles, after, when we do the post-show hang, you can do some jumps, okay? Yes, then. But not now. We can't do it now. Miles, please watch out with your tail. You're going to knock over Max Rebo. We just proved to have survived the Battle of Java's sail barge. Is Miles teaching Priya any bad habits? You could say that. Alright, we're going to let Benny Goodman finish up this song. There's a lot of people log on right at 10 o'clock, so I always give it a couple of minutes after. 50s in Pennsylvania today. I'm sorry to hear that. So I like my winters. I like sitting in the window watching the snow fall down, reading a book.
Music by Benny Goodman is being presented from the Joseph...
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's Benny Goodman for you. That means it is time for us, button push, button push, button push, to go ahead and, oh, you know, I was supposed to be up on this scene this entire last time. So, well, here you go, guys. Here's what it was supposed to be. Well, I am off to a terrific start today. This is a rather difficult tour. I haven't done it in about a year, and there's a lot of moving parts to it. But welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. I guess I had to have it on this screen the whole time so you could watch the cat's adorable antics anyway. So, I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now. Among my books are Mysterious Chicago, the book, H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil, the brand new Murder Maps USA, and coming this summer from University of Illinois Press, Graceland Cemetery, Chicago Stories, Symbols, and Secrets. I imagine the board of directors isn't going to like the word secrets in there, but it's just so cool. I'm also on the History Channel and the Travel Channel all the time. I got a meeting with them later this week so I can try to talk them out of making me go to LA this month. But anyway, I am incredibly famous, and you should definitely pay attention to whatever I say. So, welcome along, everybody. Today we are going to be covering Leopold and Loeb and their crime of the century from the early 1920s. Now, Leopold and Loeb were a couple of kids, 19 or 20 years old, already out of college and in grad school at the University of Chicago. Leopold told detectives that he had studied 15 languages. He had only actually named 13 of them when pressed, and there was only 4 or 5 that he really spoke fluently, but still, these were highly educated, very intelligent young men who, at one point in 1924, decided to murder a kid. Now, part of the reason that this story still endures and still fascinates us is there's not really a good explanation for why they did it. Different movies and different plays and different books about it have covered it in different ways. Some of them say that they decided to commit the perfect crime as the ultimate intellectual thrill. Some believe that they thought they were Nietzschean supermen who were beyond the laws of normal mortals. Some say that Loeb was a psychopath and Leopold was just kind of under his spell. Now, any of these explanations kind of work, but none of them really totally work. Nothing really explains why they decided to do what they did, and that's part of why it became what they called at the time the crime of the century in 1924. So, we're going to go on to the back of the story here. When I was a little kid, This is probably still back in the 80s. I was listening to the radio late one night. It was on a talk station. It was probably like the end of a baseball game or something. And there was a guy talking about a time when he was back in school when two kids had planned to murder him. And he said, my death had been very carefully planned, but I had to go to the dentist that day, so I was not there where they were looking for me. So they did in my classmate, Bobby. And that just kind of haunted me. It stuck in my brain for many years without realizing who this guy was or what story he was telling. I pictured him in a schoolhouse like this. This was the 80s. I pictured everybody more than about 10 or 20 years older than me going to school in a little schoolhouse like this. But really who I was listening to was an old man by the name of Artie Deutsch, buddy of Ronald Reagan, telling the story of the time that he was almost murdered by Leopold and Loeb. The school that he went to was actually the Harvard School for Boys down in Chicago's Hyde Park neighborhood. This is the Kenwood Hyde Park area, and this was the school that is still standing today, the Harvard School for Boys. George Pullman's useless sons went here for a while before getting kicked out. They got kicked out of pretty much every school they tried to go to. But this was the neighborhood. It looks pretty much how it would have looked. It was brand sparkling new at the time. But this is where Artie Deutsch would have been looked for had he not disappeared. Now, this is the way Artie Deutsch told the story anyway. I could not find one mention in any of the confessions, any of the interviews with Leopold or Loeb, or anything the detectives ever said that claimed that Artie Deutsch would have possibly been the person they were planning to kill. They had planned to kill somebody else who wasn't there that day, but it wasn't him. So this might just be Artie talking, but in any case, Leopold and Loeb couldn't find the person that they were looking for, so they ended up killing a kid by the name of Bobby Franks, who lived just a couple of blocks away from the school. Distantly related to Loeb himself, we've got a bit of a map right here. So here we have the school that I just showed on Ellis Avenue. Leopold lived just around the corner from there. And if you go just a couple of blocks down, here's where Richard Loeb lived, and right across the street was the home of Bobby Franks, who was also distantly related to Loeb, in fact. So these kids were a couple of, Leopold and Loeb were a couple of kids really themselves, just 18, 19 years old, 20 years old, highly educated, but somebody, for some reason, that May Day in 1924, decided they were going to kill somebody and ended up selecting Bobby Franks. Let's talk a little bit about Leopold himself. I mentioned just lived right around the corner, and his house would have stood right here. It doesn't happen to stand there anymore. It's long gone. Most of these houses are long gone today, but this is what it looked like at the time at 4754 South Greenwood. Now, as I mentioned, he was a highly educated kid, also a really big bird watcher. Had actually made a name for himself in the field of ornithology. Here he is observing Kirtland's warbler, a rare bird that he was actually filmed. There's a silent film of this investigating. He ran bird watching classes. He traveled all over the city collecting bird specimens. In fact, after he went to prison, a lot of his specimens were given to a museum in Elgin, which still has birds that are probably from his collection, though they didn't find out about it until really fairly recently. And once again, he lived right up over here by the Harvard School for Boys. Loeb himself lived a little bit further south. He was at a little bit further down on Ellis, where this house now stands. Looked about like this. Now, as a young boy, he was super into cowboys. It's very unusual, really, that this is an early case where we have childhood photos of the perpetrators. But here he is playing cowboys and Indians. Usually played the cowboy, as I understand it. Now, he was also super into detective stories. Now, what this could say about his psychological makeup is kind of open for questioning. There were a lot of interviews with these guys that survive, but people who were examining them psychologically at the time weren't asking the same questions that we would ask today. And it's difficult, of course, for me not being a doctor and all and not having examined the patients. I can't possibly put a psychological profile on them exactly. But Loeb, a lot of things about Loeb make us kind of suspect that he may have been what we now call a psychopath. Difficult to know for sure, but up to the time of the murder, as far as we know, they had only been involved in little crimes that were more pranks, like going back to Michigan to break into the fraternity house to steal the typewriter. But they also, in the course of their confessions after they were caught with the crime, they confessed to what they later called the A, B, C, and D crimes in the paperwork. And exactly what the nature of these were is not really known, but one that gets suspected is back in 1922, right down here about 54th and Dorchester, a guy by the name of Charles Ream was walking along when two people he later identified as Leopold and Loeb picked him up and kidnapped him, got him into their car, and when he woke up, he no longer had testicles. This was part of a wave of similar thefts that are being reported in Chicago at the time. We go into it in a bit more detail when we do the After Hours tour. There had become kind of a black market for young, healthy people's balls. There was a rumor going around, kind of weird pseudoscience, that if an old man could basically restore all of his youth with a gland transplant, people like Harold Fowler McCormick actually went through surgery. If they couldn't get a young man, they would use a goat or gorilla balls instead. It's not known to have ever actually worked, but people did try. Now, later on, after Leopold and Loeb were in prison, Charles Ream identified Leopold and Loeb as the people who had done the operation. They were brought into court over this, settled out of court. There's not really a consensus among historians as to whether we really think they did it or not. But this could have been one of the A, B, C, and D crimes. It does seem unlikely that they would have just jumped straight into doing things like killing somebody. Now, in the build-up to this case as well, we're going to have to check out 30 North Michigan, where the Walgreens now stands. Just a few months before this murder, Leopold went here to get a pair of glasses. There was an optometrist who operated out of this building at 30 North Michigan. By this time, Loeb already had it in his head that they were going to do some murdering. Leopold didn't really feel that he needed glasses, but he got a pair, this exact pair, over from this optometrist. And if you really want to be morbid, you yourself can go to this Walgreens and buy a pair of reading glasses to this day. I know people who have done this for this exact reason. It wasn't me. I cannot get glasses anywhere near strong enough to handle my eyeballs at a place like a Walgreens these days. But by this time, they were already planning the murder. Exactly what they had going through their head, what made them think this would be a good idea. It does seem that Loeb really took the lead on this. Leopold was just kind of under his spell. This is something we commonly see in true crime. When two people are involved in the crime, one of them is kind of the leader and the other is kind of under their spell. That seems to have been the case here, but of course it's difficult to know from this juncture, and again, we didn't ask the questions at the time that we would be asking today. But in the process of this, they had gone back to their old frat house in Michigan, broken in and stolen a typewriter, which they used to type up this ransom note. Now, this was before they had actually killed anybody, before they even had picked out a victim or anything, but they wrote up this letter. The idea was get all of this money together, place it in a heavy cigar box, get ready to throw it off of the train. This was going to be sent to the parents of whoever they picked. They signed it at the bottom, George Johnson. They then, as soon as they typed this up, they disposed of the typewriter over in this little marshy lagoon area by the Statue of the Republic by Daniel Chester French down in the Old World's Fairgrounds. This is Leopold called this the Golden Statue of Liberty in his confession. But one thing that kind of caught reporters by surprise at the time, or detectives, was down at the bottom, it looked like it said G-E-R. Now, they thought perhaps he was starting to write the name Germaine. Mae Reinhardt was one of Loeb's many girlfriends at the time. She was kind of a flapper. She'll come up again over the course of it. Later investigation shows that it really is a sloppy version of G-O-R. There's not actually a K there. It just kind of looks like it. It's an optical illusion, but that kept him busy a little bit. Now, Germaine was an artist, model, and bohemian who lived up at 4548 North Spalding, a building that is still standing today. Now, newspapers were just fascinated by her for a while because there was a time when this crime first came to light, a lot of people were talking about how this is all just the natural result of the Jazz Age. So, of course, they had a young bohemian girl figuring into the case. She was there for a little while, sometimes known as Patches Reinhardt or Buddy Reinhardt. She told a couple of stories to the police and then just dropped out of the news completely. 10 years later, when there were anniversary stories going around, people said that she could not be located and no one knew what had happened to her. But for a couple of days, she was really famous. But by the 1950s, she had resurfaced. In the 1950s, she was working as a hospital assistant in Highland Park. That's her over on the right-hand side there. I always thought this was great. She died in Florida in the 1990s. She had married a stockbroker, moved out to the suburbs. And I always wish more people talked to her about this. I don't think she ever talked about Leopold and Loeb again for the rest of her life after the 1920s. She lived up to the 1990s. You know, she could have provided more information about this. It's something that just drives me crazy reading like 1970s and 1980s accounts of these things. So many books about Leopold and Loeb. And so many books about all of the other things that I talk about are just rehashing the same 5 stories, and their sources are generally each other, not primary sources. People weren't going back and talking to people who were still around to give interviews about this sort of thing. Of course, they may have tried, and it may have just turned out that she had absolutely no wish to talk about this kind of thing. So, Leopold and Loeb at this point had planned a murder. They had typed out a ransom note, they had stolen a typewriter on which to do it, they had gotten rid of that. Now they figured if we're going to kill somebody, we can't do it in our own cars. Our cars are too conspicuous and well recognized, we're going to have to rent a car. And that was a complicated thing. First thing they did was go to the Hyde Park State Bank. And that is still standing right up over here. Now, they opened an account there under an assumed name, which was quite a lot easier to do at the time, then took some money up to the Morrison Hotel downtown, named for Orsemus Morrison, who comes up in the Graceland Cemetery tours, and used to own the land where it now stands. They signed the register under the name Morton Ballard, and got themselves a room there really just as because you needed an address to be able to rent a car. So they got this room and just stashed a suitcase full of books inside of it. And from there, went down on to 1426 South Michigan Avenue, where they rented a car. Now, inside of this place, Loeb went in and said, "I would like to rent a car, please." And of course they said, "Well, you're going to need a reference." So he gave him a phone number and said, "Here, call my friend at this number." The number was actually a nearby restaurant. There was a payphone there. When it rang, Leopold was waiting by it, picked up the phone and said, "Yes, I know Morton Ballard. He's a great guy. You should definitely rent him a car." So that was good enough for the rental agency. They rented him a brand new 1924 blue Willis Knight. Now, of course, this is a painting from an ad. It's not the exact thing, but this is exactly what the car they were renting would have looked like at the time. So, late May came, the day they had appointed for carrying out their crime, and they picked out their victim. It wasn't Artie Deutsch, and it wasn't Bobby Franks. It was a kid by the name of Johnny Levinson. Now, Johnny Levinson, the day that they were planning the murder, they found him out playing baseball with a couple of boys at 49th and Drexel. Couple of blocks away from the school in this boulevard area. Right where that person's walking their bicycle right now. So they watched him for a while, but then he and the other kids disappeared up an alley and they lost track of where he was. So Leopold and Loeb went down to 47th and Walgreens, Woodlawn, about where the BP is now, where at the time there was a Walgreens. And Walgreens wasn't a convenience store back then. It was more like a drugstore in the old sense of the term. It was like a soda fountain. There were little tables where you could sit. They were going to have a payphone, and they had a phone book. So from that phone book, they looked up Johnny Levinson's address and found that he lived about 40th and Lake Park, several blocks to the north. Now, they went up there hoping to find him, cruised around for a little while. And you can see the Sears Tower up in the distance now. And incidentally, if you've never been to the area around 40th and Lake Park, I highly recommend it. The architecture is really unique. It's a really cool space just to go walking around. But driving around here, they did not see John Levinson and decided that they were going to have to do something else. So they went back to the Harvard School for Boys. And here they found Bobby Franks. And Loeb said, "Okay, I know that kid. Why don't we do that kid? He'd do. His parents are rich." So they pulled up alongside him and said, "Hey, Bobby, do you want to ride?" And Bobby said, "No, I just prefer to walk." But Loeb said, "Listen, we'll get in the car anyway. I want to talk to you about this tennis racket I was thinking of buying." So they got him into the car. And this is sort of a recreation of the drive they would have taken. They went south down Ellis for a while. And at some point, when they would turn left onto 50th Street to head east towards the lake. And somewhere around here, while they were turning, they broke out the chisel. And exactly who did what is not really known anymore. They both blamed the other for this. It's one of the pieces of the case that never quite came out. Which of them was driving and which of them murdered Bobby Franks with a chisel is not really agreed on. Most likely, I would say Leopold was driving and Loeb did the killing. That just seems the most plausible explanation. They probably would have been going right by this street here, which incidentally is now blocked off. This is the street where the Obama house is now. I can just imagine people on Twitter saying, well, why didn't Obama stop this murder right in his own neighborhood? About 40 years before he was born. So, having done that, they left the body in the car for a while, drove down to 49th and Greenwood, which is where they threw the chisel out the window. Somebody saw them doing this, which would turn out to be trouble later on. Then went up to Wolf Lake, where there was a railroad culvert. It's a little thing like this. It was a little drainage line, which is no longer present. I know people who've gone poking around the Wolf Lake area, way down on the far south side, trying to figure out quite where this would have been, and couldn't quite make it out. It's all been landscaped and contoured by then. Once again, we can kind of see their stage here. They would have started out right about where the star is, gone a couple of blocks south, taken that left. They would have been right so close to his house there, too. So, with this done, they went out to have hot dogs, went home, waited around for a while. May 22nd, the day they knew the ransom note was going to arrive in the mail, they first went to 12th in Michigan to hop on a train to stash the letter. The idea was they were eventually going to have his dad throw money from the train. They had written up this letter that was going to be hidden on one of the trains at the time, then went back to that Walgreens at 47th and Woodlawn, right where the BP is now, and put in a call to Mr. Franks saying, all right, if you ever want to see your boy again, go to the Walgreens and wait by the payphone because we're going to call you with more instructions. So that's what they told him, but he was in such a panic at the time that after they hung up, he forgot where they had told him to go. Meanwhile, they had proceeded down to another train station / drugstore that was right about down here at 68th and Stony Island. Now, the train station is still there. We're underneath it right now. But the drugstore that they would have gone to here, the Bogart and Ross drugstore, I believe it was called, Bogart and Ross, is now long gone. But this is a picture of what it would have looked like, where the space would have been. Inside would have looked exactly like this. So they made the phone call again, and again tried to call the Walgreens saying, hey, hasn't anybody come in to wait by the payphone? Meanwhile, their plan was to tell them, okay, come down to this train station, get on the train, there'll be instructions for you on the train, and the train instructions would have told him to throw $10,000 off of the train at a certain point. But by this time, it was really too late. By a strange coincidence, they had thought that Bobby Frank's body wouldn't be found for weeks if it was ever found at all. But somebody had already tripped over the body and already turned it into the police. A couple of Cub reporters had realized, hey, this kid about matches the description of that kid who went missing the other day. Maybe we ought to bring in one of their cousins. So by the time that Leopold and Loeb were waiting to make the other ransom call, the family already knew that he was not being held for ransom. They knew that he was, in fact, murdered. So detectives set up camp at the Drake Hotel, where they started interviewing the suspects that they believed were the most likely to have been the killers, mainly teachers from the Harvard School for Boys. And when I say interviewed them, I mean they beat the hell out of them with rubber hoses. In this day and age, detective work was not really done scientifically. It was you get a hunch and you beat the person until you get them to confess. One of the guys from this never even really recovered from it. But of course, they didn't really have any information to give. So the next day, Leopold and Loeb went back to hanging out at Bogart and Ross's drugstore for a while. Meanwhile, Loeb that night took Mae Reinhardt up to the Edgewater Beach Hotel. And it's interesting, really, that he was dating her at all. She lived clear on the other side of town from him. This is one thing we got to consider, is that this crime spree of theirs involved automobiles. 15 years before, nobody actually owned an automobile. Most of the killers at the time operated around their own neighborhood or in the general orbit of nearby train stations. Leopold and Loeb could go to Indiana in the morning, go hang out at the Edgewater Beach Hotel at night. They went out for waffles someplace afterwards. Then he could get Patches home and go back to his place way down in Hyde Park. It opened up a lot more of the city to them for things like this. The next day, May 24th, they went to a jazz club that I don't think has ever been quite identified, but it was a jazz club over at 63rd and Cottage Grove. Loeb took a girl by the name of Lorraine Nathan, and Leopold took his girlfriend Susan Lurie. Now, years and years later, he said he was head over heels in love with her, but that was while he was trying to get paroled. At the time, he told interviewers and detectives that he was dating her, but he was never really all that into girls. Later on, he wanted to clean up his image, so he claimed that he was desperately in love with her. Sunday the 25th, detectives found the glasses. They had found the glasses nearby Bobby Frank's. Leopold, in the process of getting rid of the body, had lost the glasses. They had fallen out of his pocket. He didn't notice right away because he didn't normally wear them anyway. Now, initially, investigators thought these were probably Bobby Frank's glasses. But then some people who had figured out that maybe they didn't quite seem to be a fit, they tried putting them on the body and found that no, these must have been somebody else's glasses, most likely the killer. So they did some more research on these glasses, found that they could only really be found at one particular optometrist in Chicago, the guy at 30 North Michigan. He also found that he had only sold 3 pairs of them. 2 of them were to women who couldn't have possibly been anywhere near where this happened, and the other, of course, was to Nathan Leopold. So Leopold was brought in for questioning, kept his cool the whole time, saying, I must have lost my glasses while I was out there bird watching. I go bird watching down there around Wolf Lake all the time. Wrote up a whole letter to this effect. And since he wasn't really needing the glasses anyway, it didn't seem that unusual that he would have just lost them. They remained free for a few more days. On Wednesday, the 28th, Leopold took Susan Lurie to the Cinderella Tea Room, the Cinderella Cafe, which is a building that is still standing today. It is now known as the Grand Ballroom. Well, this is what it looked like at the time. You can see the back of some of them. You can see it a little bit where it says Cinderella Cafe underneath the chop suey place. Little details from the inside are still present. Looked about like this back then. The inside still looks roughly like this. But they came in here to have some tea, and Leopold grabbed the newspaper and said, let's see what's going on in that Bobby Frank's case today. And Susan said, you know what you should do? You should go get the reward money. You should go in and say that you were the killer the whole time and then say, I want the reward. And they had a pretty good laugh. Needless to say, she felt pretty weird about it a few days later. Over the course of that Thursday through the next Sunday, late May of 1924, the detectives started to put the pieces together. They started to interview both Leopold and Loeb, seen here with State's Attorney Crow, and they treated these guys a lot better than they had treated the teachers that they thought were suspects. The reporters were all over the Drake Hotel, so they kept them mainly in the LaSalle Hotel, which incidentally is right on the spot of the old Whitechapel Club, the old press club where crime reporters would sit around dipping their fingers in the ashes of a dead member, decorating with skulls, drinking out of skulls, etc., etc. But meanwhile, they found the suitcase in the Morrison Hotel. They had managed to trace things like a missing car that had been the strange car, the strange people in the hotel. But they found this suitcase in the Morrison Hotel that was full of books, and one of them had R.G. Loeb's signature all over it in several different kinds of handwriting. They tried to match that to the handwriting in the Morrison Hotel register and the car rental slip. Couldn't find anything quite right, but then they started looking at the ransom note again. Now, let's look closely at this ransom note. You can see for one thing here, if we look up closely, I'll try to make this a bit bigger. Look at the, above my head here, look at the lowercase t. See how it gets kind of faded down to the bottom and also is just a little bit off center. You can see that in this T above my head here now. These T's. You can see there was something kind of slightly faulty letter T. There's also a little bit with the lowercase f had a similar thing. I'm trying to find where the f is. Yeah, you can see the f, the cross on the f doesn't look quite right on these. So they noticed a lot of little things like this. Typewriters were almost like fingerprints. You could almost always match a letter up to the place, up to a typewriter where it was written on. But they found some of this in the train letter as well. But Leopold says, well, according to the experts, this is an Underwood typewriter that typed these. I type on a Corona, so I guess I'm off of the hook there. But meanwhile, there were a couple of Cub reporters who worked for the Chicago Daily News who had been in the same fraternity as Leopold and Loeb. In fact, they noticed they were hanging out over the course of Thursday through Sunday. They were hanging out with Loeb, and Loeb said, hey, let's go check on the drugstores. I bet that one of the drugstores probably got a mysterious call or probably had somebody come in who was probably the ransom guy. Let's check that out. He seemed to know entirely too much about this. And meanwhile, they also realized that Leopold and Loeb had both done study sessions where they typed up things called dope sheets, study guides. And getting a hold of a couple of those that were still extant from other classmates, they noticed the same thing. The T was a little bit off. So, comparing the ransom letter to the dope sheets, they found that everything lined up. This was clearly Leopold had been in possession of the typewriter, not only of the glasses, but of the typewriter. Now, I'll just read a little bit of the article about this. They started calling them O'Connor and Goldberg because they had stamped out the case. O'Connor and Goldberg was a shoe company. O'Connor and Goldberg, they may be till they're gray and reading the copy of Cubs Yet Unborn, but the names will be service medals, not taunts. Nobody's kidding the pair today. It's the story of a story, a perfect realization of the dreams of all the thousands of Cub reporters who come stumbling into the dusty local rooms of all the newspapers of the land, green and unskilled and ambitious. To jump from picture chasing to triumph over the whole town in the biggest story of a generation sounds like the poppycock of newspaper fiction, but O'Connor and Goldberg did it. They dug up the truth about the kidnapping story before anyone but the friends of the Franks family knew about it. They accomplished a scoop which would have given most reporters glory enough for a lifetime when they brought about identification of the kidnapped boy's body, a full jump ahead of every other newspaper in Chicago. Then they ran and taxied and poked about day and night through the week of frenzy that followed, turning up valuable information under the noses of the police and their rivals. So at this point, once this came out, Leopold and Loeb both confessed. They differed on certain things. Each of them blamed the other for doing the actual killing. They differed about who drove and who killed. Meanwhile, the police took days digging around in that lagoon until they finally found the typewriter, which looked like this. A couple of the keys had been ripped off. And the keys were never found. There's an okay chance that those keys are still in that lagoon, though by now probably buried under tons and tons of lagoon muck and mud. And it was at this point that people started calling this the upcoming trial, the trial of the century. And I was kind of surprised to actually find that phrase. We always hear this referred to as the newspapers called it the crime of the century or the trial of the century. So often we hear things like that, then I go back and I can't actually find the term in anything from within 20 years of when it was written. This time it actually was the case. So they were both put in jail to await trial. And Clarence Darrow, one of the greatest lawyers of the day, was brought in to defend them. He had made a name for himself 30 years before defending Patrick Prendergast, the guy who had assassinated Carter Harrison. And his point at the time was that in the opinion of every single doctor, Patrick Prendergast was insane. He was probably suffering from schizophrenia and really should have been given an insanity reading. It's still generally believed that if he had assassinated anybody else, he probably would have been found insane. But because it was the mayor, they had to hang somebody. Darrow was more or less retired at this point, but decided to come out of retirement for one last big case. And this all would have taken place at the courthouse that is still standing down over here at Dearborn, at Hubbard in Illinois. The jail behind them would have been on Dearborn. But still standing. There's a thing down at the bottom here. It was the site of the old North Market Hall where we once pelted Senator Douglas with produce and raw fruits over the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And you can see that it was originally built in 1872, torn down and rebuilt 1892. And here is a picture of Clarence Darrow on the left from the time of this trial, standing in front of that same space. I love it when I can line stuff up quite like this. And he decided to absolutely shock people by having them put in a guilty plea. Everybody assumed that he was going to have them pleading insanity. Other people started thinking he might lean into the idea that this was just the inevitable problems of the jazz age. There were lots and lots of articles about this. They didn't necessarily say it was jazz music that made the kids want to do this. They said it was just the jazz age. Things like, the Frank Slayers are extreme products of the jazz age, brilliant swamp flowers with poisonous perfume. Declared far present jazz age, modern methods for recent tragedy. It was all because of the modern education system. Or this guy wrote in, this fiendish crime is a product of the pagan materialistic age, the flapper jazz gin age, carried to its ultimate conclusion. An age submerged in materialism, sordid and unrelieved, an age of license and individualism gone to seed. And Chicago is shocked, incredible as that may seem. Chicago shouldn't be, for the Loeb-Leopold case is a natural product of the moral atmosphere she has acquiesced in the past 40 or 50 years. So, it's always entertaining to read old articles about jazz music. Now, at the time, people started talking about their sexual proclivities. They did find somewhere in the confession that they had some kind of a compact where Loeb had agreed that every time the two of them committed a crime, he would let Leopold do some sort of sexual thing with himself. The exact details of it are, there's words that they use, but exactly what they're talking about is kind of lost within the sands of time. They do seem to have some kind of a king-slave relationship, and they brought in a psychiatrist, State's Attorney Crow, seen here interviewing Susan Laurie, tried to make a thing, isn't this just proof that these are moral degenerates? And the psychiatrist kind of surprised him by saying, no, that kind of thing really isn't very uncommon. Really way ahead of his time in that point. But by going with a guilty plea instead of going for insanity, they were able to try it in front of just a judge. Darrow was pretty sure that any jury was going to vote to hang these guys, but by going just in front of a judge, they were able to try to put it down to just life in prison. There's my picture of them. And it worked, too. The judge may not have actually been persuaded by the ruling, but the judge did rule that, no, we're going to give the boys life plus 99 years in prison because we're just not in the habit of hanging minors in this city. Which would have been news to Nicholas the choir singer Viana, who had been hanged on his 19th birthday about 4 years before. But still, they were given life plus 99 years. In 1936, Loeb was murdered in prison by a guy by the name of James Day. He was killed near the prison bathroom with a makeshift knife. The story has always been that it was in the shower and Day was coming on to him. That's probably not exactly how it went down. There's also another kind of side story of this. One of the side legends of Leopold and Loeb states that the next day one of the newspapers said, yesterday, despite his erudition, Richard Loeb ended his sentence with a proposition. Which is a great pun. It's possible that it could have been true. It's not in any newspaper that's preserved, but papers in those days had 5 or 6 editions a day sometimes, and often only one of them would ever be preserved on microfilm. So it could have been out there sometime, but I couldn't find any reference to it until the 1970s, so it's probably just something a reporter thought of years later and wished he had said at the time. Leopold, for his part, remained in prison through the 1950s, but was eventually paroled. He managed to convince people that with Loeb gone, he was basically harmless. He had reformed himself. He offered to be injected with malaria to be a part of an anti-malaria study. Was given a release on the grounds that he accept the job in Puerto Rico. Before going to Puerto Rico, he was able to spend at least a couple of nights in Chicago. And stayed with a friend who lived on Lakeshore Drive, right about where these brown high-rises are now, these big brick high-rises. By that time, he'd been in prison for so long that the last time he'd gone down Lakeshore Drive, the thing standing right where that building would have been, was the old Potter Palmer Castle, which was, even by the time of the 1920s, was considered an old relic of old Chicago that was hopelessly out of date and almost embarrassing. But he walked by, took a glance at the news, got out of the car to puke at one point, and spent the morning walking around Lincoln Park and the Lakeshore Drive area before heading off to Puerto Rico to work as an X-ray technician, where he died in the 1970s. Now, One thing I'll point out is this tomb at Rose Hill Cemetery for the Franks family had already been built at the time. Now, Leopold doesn't really have a grave anyplace. His family is here in Rose Hill Cemetery, but his body was not returned from Puerto Rico. Loeb was cremated. The ashes were returned to the family. What was ever done with them is not fully known. It's always been rumored that he was buried in the family plot up here at Rose Hill, which looks like this. And I'm always just kind of fascinated by the fact that walking past that the Loeb family plot, you're really just a stone's throw away from the Franks family crypt. Leopold's are a little bit further east than this. Now, Leopold is known to have gone to Rose Hill Cemetery to visit the plot. It's not known if he went to the Franks, but if he went to the Loebs, as he's usually said to have done, he would have had to go right past the Franks, who are right up over here. And don't worry, I got the deer to fill out a form. He's fine with it. But, all right, everybody. So that is a 40-minute version of the story of Leopold and Loeb. Quick plugs for the upcoming events. This Thursday night, we'll be doing Architects Gone Wild, another one I haven't done for about a year now. What I always say is, architects in the 1890s and early 1900s, rivaled rock stars of the 1970s when it comes to debauchery. Then a week from today, we'll do one of my favorite ones that hasn't come up in a good 6 months, Swindlers and Con Artists in Chicago History. I love telling that one. Should you need a Mysterious Chicago sweatshirt, hoodie, you want to be cool like Luca is here, just go to cafepress.com/MysteriousChicago. That'll hook you up with all that you need. And other than that, so thanks for joining me for my first full-length tour of 2022. I will now put the Benny Goodman back on, and we will just hang out like we always do and play with the cats a little bit. So thanks for joining me, everybody. I'm Adam for Mysterious Chicago Tours, and here is Benny Goodman. Well, Thursday's not exactly an after-hours tour, but kinda. Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Laura. I don't do this one much. I think it's been about a year since I did this one. This is a lot to relearn, and the numbers on it don't tend to be that high anyway. I believe they did have siblings, but I don't remember the details offhand. This is one of the stories that I know a little better than tour guide level, but not like enough to write a book about level. I think they are in murder maps, though. Are they? I honestly don't remember. Let me see here. Thomas Neal Cream. Oh yeah, they are. They are in fact in the Murder Maps book. There's even a map. Judy, the only person I could find who was supposed to be the victim was John Levinson. Though I think half the kids in the neighborhood later went on to claim that they were supposed to be the victim. And any of them could have been, too. Okay, Miles. Yeah. Just give me a minute to answer some questions here. That being cooler than Luca, you guys forget it. No offense, but forget it. Judy, the only one that I think I've only ever seen that was plausibly trailed as a possible victim was Levinson. But once again, it could have been anybody. I think half the kids in the neighborhood, like Artie Deutsch, probably likes to claim it. Thanks, Sherry. Eleanor, I don't know if I'll be able to set the record straight, but I did interview for that episode of I Was There. I did 2 episodes for that show over the summer. But how they edit it and what they're going to have me say is anybody's guess, of course. Okay, before Miles wrecks my sweater, I better go find the toy. Hang on a second, Miles. Here it is. There you go. Come on. Just getting stretched and warmed up, I see. Ready to jump? Yeah. Ah, there we go.
Down Harlem Way, they're all trucking. And here's Helen Ward to tell you all about it.
Come on, Miles. I know you're ready to. Yeah. So they will not let me get on the computer for any length of time without getting out the toy at this point. So. All over town. Yeah, you know that thing where they say cats always land on their feet? Not these guys. Everybody's jumping. All over town. You see them shuffling, trucking along. It's that night the forest blaze came a great. They worn out already, boss? Okay. Yeah, they get along very well. They fight, but they chase each other around all the time. Oh yeah, those of you new around here, Pullman over in the comments is a ghost who messes with me. It's been a running joke for a while. Every time I go to Pullman's grave or Pullman's old neighborhood, I lose stuff or my car breaks down. He's just always got to stick it to the working man. Any more mini podcast? I've got notes on a couple more mini episodes, Dina. I'll do a couple more. It didn't really take off enough, so. But I'll do a couple more, just to round it out.
Benny Goodman presents On the Alamo.
Thank you, Betsy. Yeah, or anytime like the transmission is bad or the video is choppy, we just blame Pullman. He's not my least favorite guy in Chicago history by any means. Not even my least favorite robber baron. It would make more sense to blame Cyrus McCormick, but I don't have things break when I go to McCormick's old places. Or Wilbur F's story. Do I know what suite number the Franks were in? I'm not sure. That may or may not be findable at this point. I hope the newspapers wouldn't have published that. And everything's been renumbered since then anyway, so trying to find which room it would be now would be a whole other thing. My least favorite, I'm not that partial to Marshall Field. Definitely not Cyrus McCormick. Or Cyrus McCormick Jr. Do I think that Holmes was the Ripper? No, I do not. Holmes was in Chicago during the Ripper murders. There's plenty of paperwork. But I know History Channel's gearing up to do another thing that's going to cover that. If I can talk them out of not having me fly in the next 2 weeks, or feel like taking the risk, I don't know. It's just good business for me to do these shows. Okay, Miles, you want to jump some more? Oh, look, it's invading the desk. You gotta stave it. Come on. Whoa! Good jump.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and we stay right in the urban room of the Congress Hotel.
Their jumps are never quite as good on camera as they are in private. Sometimes they get really big ones going. We don't see as much of when we're on the air. Come on. Your TV-ready jumps. Getting stage fright? Just falling on your butt too much. There we go. Oops. Whoa, there's a good one. Oh, show me boss. Have a good day, Sue. Laura, I have read Leopold's book. I'm not sure how much stock to put into it, honestly. Well, he also, he mentions the blind kid that he helped learn to read. We cover him quite a lot around here. His grave is over at Graceland. He comes up quite a bit. Now, my parents and I discussed theories as to who Pullman might be, but everybody's got an alibi.
And we'll let the title speak for itself. Benny Goodman presenting Madhouse.
Thanks, Laura. Snowed in Arkansas. How's our snow doing? It was still falling a while ago. We got a light snow coming down here right now. Very light. But it's sun's also coming out. Jason, that's a whole other one. We did mention Highland Park briefly. Yeah, Tom, we were supposed to get like 4 to 8 inches of snow. We got maybe 2. Well, that's alright, easier to drive away from. At least it's over the grass line, so it looks good. We need to get a bit more if we can get some proper snow sledding in, though. Well, Miles will come sledding right now. Right, Miles, you want to go sled? Miles might very well want to go sledding right now. Thanks, Mark. Hey, Miles, you want to go for a sled ride? There you go. Oh, step on in. There we go.
At the beginning of his program. Let's dance.
On this day in 1864, Chicago was absolutely buried in snow and the temperature got to about 30 below. So what did we do? We went sleighing. But we'll at least hit Mount Warren. Mount Trashmore is a whole other thing. Mount Trashmore is dangerous, man. Oh yeah, you can see where the cats have hit the couch over here.
We have been presenting the music of Benny Goodman and his orchestra from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel on Michigan Avenue in Chicago.
Yeah, sleighing is a sleigh ride together with Ewing. But alright everybody, I think it's time to plug the upcoming events as the Benny Goodman is wrapping up. So, Thursday night, join us right back here for Architects Gone Wild, also known as Villains of Architecture. Many of these guys were really sleazy. Some of them worse than that. And a week from today, Sunday, one of my favorite tours, Swindlers and Con Artists in Chicago History. Tickets are unnecessary, but available over Eventbrite. Thanks to everybody who's been kicking in donations lately, especially on the Patreon. The Patreon is where you really want to be, especially now that I'm back in the legal archives. So, all right, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours, saying stay safe, stay strong, stay warm. If you can, stay home. But most of all, everybody, stay spooky, everybody.